My name is Joseph. I'm an independent curator. I'm actually a Singaporean, but I'm living in Shanghai at the moment. I've been in China in the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was in Bangkok. I was working with Southeast Asian artists and art spaces as an independent curator. Then I became a gallerist in China, working with Chinese contemporary artists as well as bringing Southeast Asian artists to China for exhibitions and cultural exchanges. But I think given the capacity of the audiences today, and also we had a little chat prior to the talk, I think we're going to keep this, I think, a little bit more chatty. But I did prepare a little short speech because there's no place like a shared sky mediating Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is a very large terrain, very diverse. I don't think there's any one particular framing that will allow for coherent understanding of the layered histories and complexities that involve history making, culture making, and art making within the region. So we have been caught, I think, in Southeast Asia, in accordance to the outside media, mass media, and also within the international art scene, we have been branding. We have been branded as an archipelago. We have been branded as a landscape of islands. We have been called the Mekong region. We have been called the Indochin. We have been branded in so many ways as Southeast Asia. I think we have to acknowledge, and not just in terms of the way that we need to comprehend contemporary art and practices, but also the long and rich histories that have informed artistic practices in the region. So in a sense, I'll begin by saying that there's no way, I don't think there is a way for us to synthesize and talk about a framing that allows a clear understanding of what Southeast Asia, or how to construct Southeast Asia, per se, given the limited time span that we have. But in the context that we are in a fair, we're in a very compact, I think a very energetic fair that we experienced yesterday. And we have a diverse group of galleries, curators, cultural workers that have supported and promote and represent Southeast Asian artists within their own region, within their own country, and also beyond their own country. So I think it's about perhaps sharing different model systems, positionings, framing their own perspective as to how they would like to promote or how they promote, and the process of promoting art that has been practiced in Southeast Asia, rather than we talk about Southeast Asia. It's too much of a layer, I think, for us to even go into that or to delve deeper into that. So I think I'd like to talk to Primo first. I think Primo is probably one of the galleries that has the longest history as a gallerist. I've had my own personal experience with the gallery, being in Beijing, when he was having a gallery in Beijing, and after that also, of course, he started to work with Southeast Asian artists in 2008, 2009, so it's been like 7, 8 years that he has been traveling between China, Southeast Asia, and Italy, where his gallery is based, and to perhaps maybe try to understand or him resolving these differences in framing or positioning the artists that he works with, especially in Southeast Asia. Primo, please.
Thank you. I started analyzing Asia, passing through the Chinese experience in the half of the 90s. And being there, I could develop my knowledge on the Chinese art, Chinese contemporary art. I opened a gallery there then in 2003 in Beijing, in the Jeu de Paume, the 798. And we started being there, looking at artists coming from other territories, not just Chinese. So we tried to learn something about Indonesian artists as a first step, Indian artists, and later Filipino, Malaysian, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and so on. What I have to talk about, Joseph, please?
I think to talk about, I think because at the moment you are actually known to, even in the fair, that you have brought a Southeast Asian artist.
Yes, yes.
To the fair, and that you have actually focusing more on artists from that region. Why the switch from sort of focusing on Chinese contemporary in the last decade to now that is more focusing on Southeast Asian art in your programming? What's the strategies behind that?
I'm keeping attention. I'm not only me. There are people in my organization. We have a connection with many curators around Asia, but we also follow a little bit of Africa. And we know many directors of museum, many collectors who travels. We also travels all around. I have a group of people that anytime take care of some territories, and we go there analyzing what happened. So our position actually is that we want to know more about Asia in general. And then when we find good experiences, good artists, good situation, we try to import, if we can say, this experience in Europe. At this moment, we are still very close with China. We think that Asia cannot be considered from a Western point of view without China. It's absolutely possible. And I think is anyway the most important area in terms of research, in terms of culture, in terms of schools, in terms of institutions also that are growing up every day. But we have seen in these last 8-9 years how it could be developed, the Southeast Asia, starting from basically Indonesia, with the great situation that everybody can see if you go in Yogyakarta and Bandung, or at least also Jakarta. There are also other interesting situation in Bali also, if Bali is more known as a touristic place, but there are some good artists. Gede Mahendrayasa, one of the most important Indonesian artists, live there. And we think that Southeast Asia is a quite interesting place for original artistical approach. What we are looking more is finding not good artists, but artists with new lines in terms of research that try to have experience coming from different territory or far territory from my territory that is Europe, that are not doing work having in the back the idea of another artist, that are not doing the new consequence, artistical consequence after Warhol. We are looking to artists that come from them culture but has the strengthness to refine an original approach to the art. And when we find, we are very happy to meet, and we try sometime to have them presented in the West. Sometimes I ask a help to local critics like ERIN that is here. We had a show 2 years ago, and I asked the help of people who are there and that really can follow daily what happened, and especially the work of an artist. Of course, bringing all these artists in the West, that is our mission. We must be very careful about this aspect. Still, if they are Chinese or Southeast Asia artists.
What kind of negotiations you have to face? Because as far as I know, you're probably the only gallery in Italy that has shown a wide range of artists in the Asian region, and possibly the only gallery in Italy that extensively showed or showcased Southeast Asian artists. So what kind of the process of negotiating that to bring artists from Southeast Asia region into Italy?
This is a very strong question, Joseph. We should take a lot of time, but I don't want to take the time to the other guests. It's a very strong question. Anyway, everything starts with something that for me is important. It's a serious approach because when we take an artist that we believe it's the right artist in the moment to show in our gallery, that one is in Italy, one is in Switzerland. We have two galleries. It's that we are responsible about that. You are living there, you are living there. You know that, like in the West, many artists has an experience in the art for sometimes for a period, not all during the life, and sometimes have difficulty, so they stop doing art. There are many situations. We are responsible of everything. So when we take an artist, we must be fully convinced that this artist thinks to be an artist for long part of his life, putting all his energy in the production of original, I can say, but it's reductive word, original artwork. And doing that, we must also see which kind of support these artists have. For example, it's important if they have in the territory a good gallery, if they have good critics or curator who follow the artist, if they have at least also a good market, because when we bring in Europe Southeast Asia artists, we have to convince people that this kind of art that they don't know and they don't recognize as a first step is relevant, like the art of German, English, established artists. But we have to consider that then they put also money on the artist. And we are working since 90, so we have 25 years of experience. Any years, collectors come at the gallery and want to know what happened to the artist. Probably they don't want to get more money from the piece of art they have, but they want to know that what they put in the art is saved at least. Somebody can disappear, can be a meteorite in the art, but they want possibly that the artist they believe it in, it can be an artist at the time they are asking about and can be doing something interesting. So we have this kind of responsibility. Of course, the first step is to individuate the right artist. This can be done right or wrong, of course, and this is a complex approach, a global approach. But then we must be responsible, because then we carry this artist in Europe and around Europe through many fairs and many appointments with institutions, with museums, with biennial, and so on. And we must be very safe indicating and suggesting an artist to the collector that are our followers. I don't know if that answered to your question.
I think it's really to solidify. I think in Southeast Asia there are certain areas of interest within certain specific countries that are actually in sync with a growing art market internationally, and Primo is in the middle of all this catch wave. However, I want to perhaps maybe sitting beside me is ERIN GLEESON, who's on the opposite end of the spectrum, where she actually founded and initiated an artist-run initiative in Cambodia, where most collectors or patrons or institutions in the West, they are more in sync or more possibly heavily in favor of certain more publicized countries in Southeast Asia. Cambodia, what's the situation in Cambodia? And you know, she's been the only artist-run initiative in this panel right now, so maybe we should you know, hear how she would share, you know, her experience in Cambodia and her experience working with Primo on bringing Southeast Asia or Cambodian artists in both sides, non-profit and private galleries.
Yes, as Joseph said, I am a co-founder of a space called Sa Sa Bassac. We have a very small wall booth here at the entrance with Svai Saret. We came together. I've been in Cambodia for 13 years. I back up a bit, teaching art history and collaborating with artists and local institutions on a number of levels. About 5-6 years ago, 6 artists in the art collective, Steve Silabak and I, came together to really as an experiment to found a space together and to test whether or not a very typical exhibition space many places, you know, in the world have, and to make a very small program that resembles perhaps one in many places of the world as well. So we're really a mini art center. We're a resource center, library, reading room. We have a very extensive public program, children's classes, and a huge 60 square meter gallery. For us, it's very big. And we wanted to test if the solo exhibition was the thing that artists needed, and especially with a model of commissioning the work. So again, all as a test. It wasn't happening necessarily on its own in that kind of format. And so we realized within the first year we were very busy. We had 12 shows. And just to see if we made a model, you know, that looked like Quynn's gallery, Primo's gallery. Actually, Quynh is a model for us, for sure. She was open before, and Richard's gallery. I mean, amongst our neighbors, do Cambodian artists need that in order to survive as an artist? We knew we couldn't do much in terms of the market for a number of reasons. Cambodia's very specific history and its current place in the regional and global market. It's not yet at a place where we could foster relationships with local collectors. We tried a bit, and then we thought this is really, we prefer to work in education for perhaps the next generation with leading high schools and universities. Not about collecting, of course, but about education. And so it came to be that the space was very functional and I guess played an important role for the lives of the artists and of developing an audience very primarily connected to the artists, their students, friends and families first. And in that first year we had kind of up to 40 different types of invitations for those 12 artists. Some of them, you know, with partners, such as the people here, and if not with the people here, with the artists that they work with. And so we realized, yes, there's a place for such a kind of standard space and program and perhaps a gallery program. But in terms of the market, we're an art fair, so I try to answer to this. Now and then we get to collaborate with great place like Art Stage. We've done a nice collaboration with Art Stage Singapore and also Asia Now. But I very much depend on partners such as Primo. I've done exhibitions with many different galleries that are open to working with artists from Cambodia. And those artists, you know, as a small nonprofit, we don't, let's say, earn or benefit so much directly to keep our program going. But it keeps the artists going. And without those collaborations, the artist cannot continue, you know, to have a career as an artist. And due to the history in Cambodia, there's not really a generation to look up to for the young artists right now because most of them are have passed away. So to make sure that there's a healthy, you know, a healthy program, a healthy exhibition program and public program is important, but also that the young artists at university can see that there are a few artists that can survive, can have a career. Not about wealth. Of course, some of them are becoming very wealthy, but that it's a career path and it's a channel that's important for cultural history and social and political history. So it comes down also to the point of social and political response. A lot of the works are very grounded in real life. So Primo was saying original. It's very reactive to the lived experience, most of the work. And so therefore the kind of temperament or the tone of the work is not, not everybody's receptive to this type of work. So to find partners, we've been very lucky to work with a number of institutions. Most of our collectors are museums, very, very few private collectors. And those that are private collectors are have focused collections on Southeast Asia. And it's normally their kind of extension into the mainland. They need something from Cambodia to fill their inquiry about Southeast Asia. And so we were talking beforehand a bit about that collaboration between East and West, and that the artist, for sure, in my context, is dependent very much on the connections. First, locally, second, regionally. Singapore is always bringing everybody. They need Singapore, the positions of the museums mainly. Korea is vying for that position in Southeast Asia as well. And then graduate to being an Asian artist with the Asian Biennales. And once you're local, regional, and then Asian, then you can normally take this international step, which, as we were speaking about, normally means Europe or America. So, yeah.
I mean, this local, kind of promoting self-awareness locally for an artist in Southeast Asia practicing in a certain country, and this is what we were talking about just now, whereby I think Richard Koh from Malaysia, who's a contemporary art specialist and also a gallerist, play a very proactive role as a gallerist. He's more than just a gallerist because he's always trying to perpetuate interest for the artists that he works with, institution, fairs, trying to balance strategies between again academic and commons. So perhaps maybe we can ask Richard to share what's the importance or the significance of a local artist thinking local first, and then regional, and then international. Why is that process going on?
Well, basically, I think before anyone can go global, they have to think locally, And the gallery has been around for 10 years, and we work with artists who are born after the 70s. And basically what we do is we give them a platform, not so much for showing them in the West or in China or Asia, but more for a Southeast Asian platform. What we do is we try to cross them with Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. These are the main, basically the main audience in Southeast Asia for Southeast Asian art at the moment. What we believe is in order to have an audience outside of Southeast Asia, one should have a solid foundation in your own Southeast Asian region, because in general, museums or institutions in the West, they are not going to buy, say, an artist from Indonesia per se or Thailand per se, but they will look at it in a broader sense of Asia. And Southeast Asian being so prominent these days, they will look at it from a wider point of view. And it goes the same with the collectors. From my experience, there are a big number of Western collectors who are interested in Southeast Asian art, but they can't seem to find a proper focus point or a source to refer to or to start the basis of collection. Because every time when they look at a certain artist from a certain country, it tends to be either they're very well known in the West and not known in their own region, or they are totally very market orientated. So it's how to find the right balance in between, where they actually have a solid foundation back home before they could be transplanted somewhere else. I'm sure, like in the West, there are many Southeast Asian artists who are quite well known here, but totally unheard of back home. And you have artists who are very well known in Southeast Asia who's totally unknown here. So it's really, at the end of the day, how to strike a balance so that they go global properly, you know, not just localized or Western-centric in that sense. So that's what we try to do, not so much as taking them or being labeled international, but more to the point of making them known to collectors and institutions in Southeast Asia first, because that is the area we are in, and to give them a focus point. I think that's what we do anyway.
Yeah, I think like in contrast to Primo, which is more like 10 minutes. Is that it? Okay, we now go straight to Quynh. I think Quynh is very specific because she posts one of the earliest galleries, private galleries in Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, and she specifically promotes Vietnamese artists from Vietnam, whereas Richard has extensively promoted artists across the board, Southeast Asia, Primo as well, so perhaps maybe Quynh could go into maybe more on how she just focused extensively on Vietnamese art.
Okay, so most of our artists, definitely they're Vietnamese or they're from the diaspora. Basically, you know, we want to position ourselves as an international gallery, to be honest. I actually bring a lot of international artists as well into our program. However, there are amazing Vietnamese artists that have voices they want to share, and there are no real platforms for them in Vietnam. You have just a handful of art spaces in the entire nation that are willing to actually show work that is challenging, that's intelligent, that's difficult. And so that's the reason why we work with a lot of Vietnamese artists, because there aren't spaces in Vietnam who do that. So being in Ho Chi Minh City, I feel like I've got a responsibility as well to share, you know, these voices, to basically, yeah, you know, these artists actually, like ERIN was saying, their works are also very rooted in their daily lives, you know. This is also, it's quite hard for an international audience at times if they don't understand the nation of Vietnam. I mean, actually I had some discussions in Europe, and people sometimes they don't even know where Vietnam is, in fact. So for them not to be able to even get the context, it's quite tricky. I mean, it's a different aesthetic as well that the artists are working with. I mean, some of the artists we work with, in fact, a number of them have graduated with MFAs abroad. So they've come back to Vietnam. This is the work that actually is most appealing, to be honest, to an international audience, because they go to the most prestigious art schools in the West, and they're speaking in this global, this language that people understand internationally, and that's what's attractive to an international audience. But the fact that, you know, we work with Vietnamese artists, but it's a wide spectrum actually, in terms of the type of work they do and their local histories and how their works have evolved. So I don't know if that's answered the question in terms of why we work with Vietnamese artists, but there aren't many cultural workers, in fact, in Vietnam. And, you know, ERIN runs a nonprofit. I mean, Primo and Richard also, they do a lot of nonprofit work as well. But we in Vietnam, my gallery, we wear many different hats there. So we do a lot of education. We also work, you know, we cooperate with San Art, who's an amazing nonprofit in Vietnam, because we feel that it's important to build the infrastructure for contemporary art there, because there aren't a lot of people doing that. So on the one hand, we do this educational work, and on the other, we have to balance that with, you know, the commercial side of running a gallery, in fact.
I think let me just speak, maybe conclude with my own experiences. I spent most of my years in Thailand. I'm practically a practicing gallerist in China, but when I was in Thailand, I was also setting up, we call it, not a non-profit, we call it a private gallery, but actually running like a curator, artist-run initiative with Rakrit Tinariwat, which is, of course, apparently a very internationally based Thai artist, who, in our space, is like we are a proud 25 square meter art space, putting up shows that encourages conceptual thinking and processes among emerging artists. But we never, in a way, promote ourselves, or we relentlessly refuse to apply for grants, we relentlessly refuse to get into the status of non-profit, because we want the public to understand that art in itself, conceptual art in itself, the market in itself is constantly changing in our system, in our current condition. And so conceptual art can even be bought. Conceptual art can even be processed as something that is viable in the art market. So it's kind of a mix between what Primo, ERIN is doing, but we call ourselves a private gallery, but which in fact is almost like a strategy, a curatorial strategy to stick that we believe in the values of conceptual practices, and we believe that we can even promote and sell conceptual works. And that was actually around 7-8 years ago. We are glad that, of course, as year progresses, because in 2005 to 2008, there was a boom of contemporary Southeast Asian art that's been collected institution-wise and also with private patronage. And then since then, you see places like Sa Sa Bassac getting into art fairs, which in our time we would never imagine that. In our time, it's really about what Richard said, introducing to a very specific, or to a local audience about specific art practices, and then see where it grows. Again, not in an educational way, but in a way that we think what that period represents at that moment for Southeast Asia art, and that which is art and the market, which is so as what Primo said, but Primo and Richard practices reverse, which is like a private gallery, but actually they put a lot of their effort into making sure that institutions within their own region, within their own countries, get to hear voices and dialogues of the artists that they represent. But anyway, shall I throw any questions from the floor? 1 or 2 questions before we close?
Just one question about a specific country which is going to be in the headlines in the coming months, which is Myanmar. Any hints or clue or information about this country regarding contemporary arts?
I can tell something about my experience. I think that also ERIN can talk, but also Quynh can talk. They are very close to Myanmar. I've been there sometimes, and there is an interesting art scene, despite from the political situation of the country. And I could see recently, last year I was there for the last time, I could see some new gallery opening in different places of Yangon. I was mainly there. And there are some quite interesting artists, also if the work is not so well developed outside Myanmar. But I think it can be an interesting growing attention. I have an artist that I'm representing that lives there, that is from Myanmar, that personally I think is one of the best artists. It's difficult to say, it's not promotion, but having seen what I could see all around, it seems to me that the more complete and the more adapt for being an artist, not coming from a territory, but be an artist at all. That is, this artist is Aung Ko. And anyway, it's, in my opinion, an interesting area, and we'll see more and more in the future. The main difference, if I can tell something, not to cut the voice to my people, is that in all the Southeast Asia, I'm seeing growing scenes where there are great schools. Because many young guys want to practice art, want to know, study art, and want to have experience and have teacher. This situation is quite strong in China. This situation, I could see it quite strong in Indonesia or in Philippines. For example, in Yogyakarta, at the Easy School, there are 30,000 students. And you can imagine when you can go in, if it allowed the level of the artist also at 19, 20 years old. The problem in other place that I have no a total experience, but I haven't seen important school, or haven't seen important school who take, like in Singapore, for example, recently, good teacher from everywhere, and they do a strong teaching, considering the own internal roots and culture, but also open to know and try to understand and try to learn the new techniques, for example, in the painting, in the sculpture, in the video art, and so on. So I think that this is mainly a problem from Myanmar. So this is something that can stop the power of this young talent that also Myanmar has.
Perhaps maybe ERIN, you would like to add? Or?
While I agree in part, I also think some of the best work is coming from those places because of the kind of lack of infrastructure education, a certain type of education, because we can learn from perhaps Singapore of the kind of hyper-refined education systems that are making extremely, in many cases, very, very extremely only museum practice, for example. But yes, that fusion I think is really important when you do have a very important school or just very important local professors, which of course are really absent in Cambodia, so I agree. In terms of artists, I agree Aung Ko is one of the greatest too. Myanmar has a really fantastic and really diverse scene with very different types of kind of sectors within the contemporary arts. Performance is very important, and the documentation of performance. So you find a lot of photography. It was also a very easy way to share the work outside of the country until recently. So, you know, images or videos could be packaged up and carried over the border very easily. And a lot of the work, similar to Cambodia, and I'm sure many contexts in Southeast Asia and in many other places that are related, works are really made in response to the lived experience, as I said. And so it's very, I think, very prominent in Myanmar as well. So that the work is made for the artist, really for the artist's response to having to exist in a certain condition. Secondly, it might be for the artist's community of artists. And beyond that, way, way, way down the line, they might or might not care about the West, the collector. It's really secondary. I think the instinct or impulse, especially in those places without the schools, is they must make work. And it's also why sometimes artists are not able to maintain the practice as an artist, and why I think galleries like maybe Primo is taking a risk, you know, working with artists in unstable conditions. But at the same time, for the time that they are able to be an artist, it's really extraordinary practices and really extraordinary dialogues coming from it, aesthetically, but also, you know, socially. I think lately you were seeing Myanmar on higher platforms. There's the Cité des Arts residency program in the Palais de Tokyo this year in Paris has been really focused on Myanmar, as well as Mossad. He's a performance artist. He's for the Hugo Boss Asian Art Prize, one of 6 in all of Asia. This year, actually, there's 3 Southeast Asians out of the 6, one from Cambodia, too, and then Maria Taniguchi from the Philippines. So, yeah, I think Myanmar is really moving. There's great things happening there.
I'm sorry, but we have to wrap up the session according to the organizer. So if you, thank you to Primo, to Quynh, Richard, ERIN, and myself. Thank you for listening to us. And if you want to know more, there's actually a lot of, it's a web of complexities within Southeast Asia. We could talk a lot about the practices, the market forces, the institutional concerns, and hope you enjoy our talk. Thank you.